Welcome to the ProLife Team podcast. I'm Jacob Barr. I'm here with Ann O'Connor, and we're going to be talking about legal concerns with new laws and current laws, and just sort of the outlook that we currently have in our country in regards to pregnancy clinics. So, Ann, I'm excited to have you on the ProLife Team podcast. Would you introduce yourself as if you were talking to a couple pregnancy clinic leadership teams?
Great. Thanks, Jacob, for inviting me. My name is Ann O'Connor. I'm the Vice President of Legal Affairs at NIFLA. NIFLA stands for the National Institute of Family and Life Advocates, and we're the legal medical arm of the pregnancy center movement. We have about 1,600 centers that are members, and we started about 30 years ago because we saw there was a real need to help centers cross their T's and dot their I's in the legal aspects, and also it grew into the medical as centers were converting to medical. So that's what NIFLA specializes in. I've been with them for about 28 years. I'm an attorney. I'm licensed in California and in New Jersey. And then Tom Glessner is our founder and president, and he's an attorney as well, licensed in Washington and the state of Virginia. And then we have one other attorney. She's just coming on full-time this month. Her name is Angie Thomas, and she is from Louisiana. And she ran a pregnancy center, a big pregnancy center in New Orleans for the last 12 years. So she comes with a lot of practical experience.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'm going to be at your conference this next week. I'm sure this video will probably get done way after that, but I'm looking forward to seeing you and Tom and your team in person.
Awesome. Thanks for coming. We're excited about it.
Yeah. And so, I guess I want to ask you about the Dobbs ruling, but I also want to ask you about like what's currently happening in the legal world that pregnancy clinics should be aware of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Dobbs decision, I mean, the leak just threw us off, right? And the fact that we don't know who the leaker is still really just sounds a little fishy. The Dobbs decision itself, I thought Justice Alito did an incredible job writing it even where a layperson could read it and understand it. And basically, he said there's no right to an abortion in the Constitution. You can't even look between the lines and find a right to an abortion. And the fact that it takes the life of a human being puts it in a different realm than any other of those privacy rights, like rights for contraceptives or even same-sex marriage, any of those. So it was refreshing to read his opinion, but it kind of triggered a lot of chaos, right? Because what it did was it sent it back to each state to decide, and it's just been on fire since. And what we didn't really contemplate is the violence and hatred against pregnancy centers that would result because of it. So that was a little bit shocking. Since May, since the leak decision, I think it's up to 70 pregnancy centers have been vandalized. A good handful of them have even been firebombed. There has not been one arrest that we're aware of.
Really? Not one?
Mm-mm.
Is that based on all the clinics that are being attacked, it would seem like they would have surveillance videos or in-person witnesses. And so the fact that there's no arrest seems like, is that because the prosecutors won't prosecute, or what's the thought there?
Well, it's hard to tell. The FBI is telling us they're investigating it under the FACE Act, which is the same act as Freedom to Access to Clinics, clinic entrances, FACE. And it's the same law that they used to prosecute pro-life protests that interfere with abortion clinic operations.
Really?
They told us that our centers qualify as reproductive health centers because we're dealing with reproductive health issues, and therefore they are investigating it under FACE, which means there would be a criminal prosecution. We're not, if there were 70 Planned Parenthoods that had been attacked since May, you bet there would be arrests. You'd have the president talking about it, and the DOJ talking about it, and be on the media constantly. You'd hear crickets
Hmm.
about these centers. Yeah. But pregnancy centers have taken steps to provide security for themselves, including security cameras, and just, policies and procedures in place so that no one's working alone at the center. They're very careful about going out to the parking lot. And we anticipate during the elections in November, it will heat up again. So we're telling pregnancy centers, please be on the alert. Some of them hired security guards. Some of them had volunteer patrols. And there is video, but it's the attacks have been done at night under the cover of dark with hoods and masks. So it's been hard to identify them, perhaps.
Yeah, that makes sense, especially when it comes to, yeah, if they're hooded and it's dark. That would, yeah, that's interesting. So wow. So one of the thoughts that comes to mind that I want to ask you about is, with with the work that you do, and now there's every state has its own makeup of legal, well, laws that are now in place. How are you managing that, and like, what's your current thoughts on the state of our country? It probably is a bit overwhelming to say the least, based on doing something with that many different variables.
Yeah, it definitely is overwhelming. Um, Luckily, our focus is pregnancy centers. So for pregnancy centers, nothing's changed too much. They
True.
still are helping women who are facing unplanned pregnancy. So whether they're in the state that bans abortion or in a state like California that allows abortion even after birth, that's still our main focus. Um, but what's happened is the different states have attacked pregnancy centers. Like you probably all heard, Senator Warren in Massachusetts has gone after pregnancy centers terribly. The Attorney General in Massachusetts has issued a consumer alert about pregnancy centers. So we're seeing more and more things like that. Um, different cities actually, and Los Angeles is looking into one now, an ordinance that would prevent pregnancy centers from fraudulently advertising. Those have been passed in several cities in Massachusetts, and there's federal legislation that Senator Warren has sponsored that says the same thing.
Hmm. Yeah, so you mentioned when you mentioned the perinatal abortions in California. I remember there was a law, and I forget the numbers right now, but there was a law that they passed within the last 8 months, and it was protecting that. And they keep saying it's not abortion after birth, but that's perinatal means like 1 to 30 days or some period of time after birth. That's the perinatal
Correct.
stage, and there's like
Yep.
no investigation on the why, or what
No,
caused the death.
no.
Um,
I mean, California is
yeah,
off the charts, off the charts. I feel bad for pregnancy centers in California. And Newsom is even putting up billboards in surrounding states and quoting the Bible,
yeah.
saying,
Quoting
"Come to
Jesus.
us for abortion."
It's just so disturbing to see, because he's mocking Jesus or God, and that is, yeah, that's just that's gonna come back to him.
Right. I mean, we're really seeing how people are calling evil good and good evil now. It's like so clear.
Yeah, I just I couldn't have imagined someone using words of Jesus to defend the idea of come to California for an abortion. But that's literally
Right,
what, like, that's what he did.
right.
Like, that it
I
seems like,
mean,
yeah,
Satan quoted the Bible too,
that's
right?
true. Yeah,
He quoted the Bible when he was tempting Jesus and for the 40 days. So,
yeah. He did it more than once. That's right. That was his, like, yeah, using God's word to try and deceive.
mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah, it didn't. I'm not sure if that's what it didn't really feel like Newsom was doing that. It felt like he was trying to just like sucker punch people in the in those states. Like it felt more like a like a visceral attack against
Right,
Christians and believers in that space.
right.
More so than trying to use it as like yeah, as a puzzle or a mind twist like Satan did to Jesus. I think, but yeah, it's similar. It was the
Mhm,
same tactic, but I think it was used a little bit differently.
mhm.
And then it seems like California had so many laws passed. Like I think it's like 14 or so. I don't even know what the number is, but they've passed so many abortion focused laws. And has any other state had that, yeah, I guess which states are almost as active as California? I have no idea. I see a lot of what's happening in California, but I don't quite know if anyone else is actually as active in the
I mean,
abortion scene.
New York is really bad.
Okay.
And they also passed a bill that will go after pregnancy centers. It authorizes the Division of Consumer Affairs to do a whole big investigation of pregnancy centers, only pro-life ones, and find out how they're funded, what information they give out, how they advertise, what kind of clients they're seeing, and then they're supposed to prepare a report on how to best regulate these pregnancy centers.
Wow. Sounds
Vermont,
like a
Vermont is bad too.
okay.
Vermont it has on the ballot, so does California, to put abortion in their state constitutions, the right to abortion.
Is abortion, do you know if it's in any state constitution currently? I really don't know the answer to that one.
I think several state Supreme Courts have interpreted their state constitutions to include the right to abortion.
Okay.
Um, and I think even Alaska is one of those states. So yeah,
You said that was it Vermont that was looking to, and are they actually looking to use a statement that would use the word abortion and add it as an addendum to their constitution or
I I think without having it from me, I think it's more like, reproductive rights are a
okay.
constitutional right.
Okay, yeah, and
Mhm,
that makes sense.
mhm.
Um, wow. So with all this going on, I guess how do you prioritize or what is your thoughts on where to, yeah, it just feels like the number of things to look at has increased. So how do you currently figure out where to spend your time?
Right. That's a good question. Because I don't really feel like I get to decide. I feel like it's just like the fire hose coming at me, and whatever's aimed at me right now is what we're focusing on. Google and Yelp were up to no good about advertising. You certainly know that.
Yeah.
Um, all this state legislation against pregnancy center, the Senator Warren doing all her stuff against pregnancy centers, and then the media is not friendly to us, so we help centers navigate whether they should even bother to do an interview with the media who are knocking at their doors. So every day seems to be something. It's definitely a battle, right?
Yeah.
um
And it seems like for pregnancy clinics that are a member of NIFLA, they get to rely on you to figure out all of the fire hose information to a degree, and then they get to bring you their concerns, in which case you can then focus on their concerns, I'm sure. But it seems
mhm.
like for groups that are a member of NIFLA, like that probably gives them at least some level of peace of mind that you and your team are actively trying to figure this out and working on
Hmm.
these all these pieces. Um, is there any other group that's similar to NIFLA that's like the legal, defense group for pregnancy clinics that are? It seems like NIFLA is the only group that I know of that does this, where like ADF is more of like a Christian legal group, more so than focused on like the way NIFLA is to pregnancy clinics.
Right. Yeah. NIFLA's main and only focus is pregnancy centers. ADF is incredible. We rely on them a lot. They represent us in cases. And I was just on their website today to do some research. They're fighting in so many arenas. It's amazing. Thank God for them.
Yeah.
Um, and I know pregnancy centers have been represented by them. There's several great pro-life Christian attorney networks. Thomas More, Life Legal Defense Fund, um, Pacific Justice, the Liberty. There's some great groups. ACLJ. Um, so we're grateful for that. But our focus is not so much in litigation. Our focus is in helping centers so they avoid litigation. So they avoid any kind of gap in their services that could cause them any liability. So, for an example, we're real concerned about the centers when they're doing ultrasounds that they have well-trained staff and really tight policies and procedures for doing ultrasounds, because our biggest risk there is missing an ectopic pregnancy. We're doing scans very early, like women are just finding out they're pregnant and they're thinking about getting the abortion pill. So we say, come in, let's make sure you're even pregnant first before you go down that. So we're doing scans very early, and sometimes we don't see anything, or we're not able to confirm a pregnancy at that scan. But that kind of leaves her in limbo. Like, we haven't confirmed a pregnancy. She has a positive test. We have to be very careful about an ectopic pregnancy. So that's the kind of thing NIFLA does all the research on, creates policies and procedures, analyzes other cases, and is able to tell centers, here's a really good set of policies and procedures. Implement this. Make sure your sonographers are highly trained and skilled, and that they've been assessed as competent. It's not like anyone can pick up an ultrasound wand and do an ultrasound. It's a medical test, and RDMSs, who are sonographer techs, they go to school for like 2 years for it and have to pass national boards. So it's a big skill to learn, and it can be learned according to A1 guidelines by nurses, very effectively, but they have to be well trained.
So if someone had a positive pregnancy test and they come in very early for the ultrasound and it's, essentially it sounds like it's too early to detect with the ultrasound because it's very early. Would the normal response be to come back in 2 weeks or in some period of time to do another ultrasound, or what would be the normal response to that
Mhm.
situation?
Yeah, so it varies with what her LMP was and what we're seeing when we do the ultrasound, but we probably wouldn't wait 2 weeks. The only time we would wait 2 weeks for a scan is if we confirmed an intrauterine pregnancy. We saw the gestational sac, we saw the yolk sac in the uterus. Then we know there's not an ectopic floating out there. So then come back in a week or two and we'll scan again and you'll see the heartbeat, you know.
Okay.
But if it's earlier than that and we can't confirm, a few things are in the womb, then we'd have them come back in a couple days.
Okay.
Uh, and we'd send them with ectopic and miscarriage precautions. If you start bleeding or you start cramping, do not ignore it. Call your physician right away. Go to the emergency room if it's bad.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that's why you're there with that great information, and well, and the medical teams would have that great information to, yeah, to have the follow-up at the
Mhm.
appropriate time. That makes a lot of sense. Um, so so when it comes to the current legal world, what's one of the things that seems to be coming at you that you're having to work on, or that you feel like pregnancy clinics would need to know about, or that or maybe they do know about, but you maybe could share some more about?
Yeah. Well, one big thing is the whole HIPAA, medical privacy, right? And the pro boards are making a lot of accusations saying, oh, pregnancy centers don't have to keep your information confidential. They're going to share it with law enforcement. All baloney. But for years, we've been training pregnancy centers to comply with HIPAA. Technically, unless a medical facility is billing or communicating with health plans electronically, technically HIPAA doesn't apply. But it's standard in the industry. And, we want to protect patients' health information. So we're very strict about that. We have a whole set of HIPAA policies and procedures. One big area is texting. You know, centers are very relational. So they want to communicate as much as possible with their clients. And texting is usually not a secure way to do that. So we have to just make sure we're following through, getting written permission from the client to text, not texting PHI, things like that.
Yeah, we were there's a software called Live Chat, and it's like a chat program that's on a website. And in order for it to be HIPAA, well, part of our HIPAA compliance, besides, well, several steps that come along with that software, one was to have a disclaimer, essentially because that chat software is not much different than an SMS text level concern. And so essentially the idea is, do you agree to this? And they have to hit yes or no. If they hit yes, then the chat will proceed. If they hit no, then the chat will stop. And the idea is to try and have that agreement before the chat will even begin. And that was something that we just
Mhm.
recently applied to a
Mm.
clinic. And anyway, all that to say is, it makes sense to ask for someone's permission if they accept that passing it over SMS.
Yeah,
Yeah, or something like
definitely.
SMS. Yeah. Um, and HIPAA seems like, yeah, seems like the groups that are performing the billing for services, or they're in a more whole women's healthcare model, they're under HIPAA. And then those that are under like limited ultrasound with STI testing and pregnancy tests with the free model are technically not under HIPAA, but some will, or many will, voluntarily follow those guidelines, but they're at the same time not technically under those guidelines.
Right.
Maybe
And we,
clinics
we would
share
urge
information. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Mhm. We would urge every single center to comply with HIPAA. It's not that difficult, especially if you're not billing. If you're doing billing, then that's a whole other IT area, right? But it's not that hard to comply with HIPAA. It includes training. You have to appoint a privacy officer. That's usually the nurse manager. You have to have protocols in place. Um, but state law can pull a center under HIPAA. So, they have to know their state law as well. Like in California, the state law pulls the centers under HIPAA. They can't say, oh, no, we're voluntarily complying. No, you are under HIPAA. You have to comply with the state and the federal law.
Yeah. And so it seems like, yeah. And so I guess I'm not familiar with California's position on that as much. I know Texas has like special rules for like every
Mhm.
clinic is under their HB 300, which is sort of like
Mhm.
HIPAA plus a little bit. And then, but yeah, so yeah, so how would someone get pulled into being under HIPAA in California? Like, what would that scenario look like?
Well, the law says if you collect private health information, PHI, you have to comply with the law.
Okay.
That's basically what it says. It doesn't, so under the federal HIPAA, it defines a covered entity, one that has to comply with HIPAA, as someone who communicates electronically with health plans, bills electronically. And so there's like 8 categories that are all in that realm. And most centers don't bill. But if you're in a state like California, it it defines covered entity very broadly, any entity that collects private health information. must comply with the privacy laws.
Okay. Yeah. So that's very broad, more so than billing. That's
Mm-hmm.
wow, that's a lot to think about.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess if for those who are listening in California, this is probably a good time to email Anne and add to her inbox of 500. Um, yeah, actually, let's say someone's in California, they're currently not under HIPAA or thinking they're not under HIPAA, but maybe they really should be, or maybe they really are. What would that be reasonable for them to reach out to someone on your team, or what would you suggest that they do if they're in that situation?
Yeah. So we did research in every single state, and we have a memo on every single state on the members' website, NIFLA website, so they could log in there, pull down their state law, and read it, see if it complies, and it will tell them, what steps to take. Um, so that would be a good place to start.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Mm.
Um, it seems like most pregnancy clinics are a member of NIFLA. There's very few that seem to not be. Um, I guess I don't know what
We
the
have,
percentage is, but is it like
yeah,
60% or 70 are members of NIFLA, or is it? It's a lot at least. I know it's a lot.
well, we have 1,600 members, and we love
Okay.
all of them. About 1,400 are medical facilities.
Okay.
So we still have a good handful that aren't medical, probably won't ever go medical, don't need to go medical, still doing great work. So that's why we focus on the medical and the legal. So there's something for both kinds of centers.
Okay. So it looks like maybe about half of is it 3,000 clinics that are in the US or roughly?
Mhm. Yeah, between 2,700 and 3,000, I've heard.
Okay.
Mhm.
That makes sense. Um, yeah. So going back to that leak and the fact that the person that leaked it was not identified, that's still a bit shocking that it's not been figured
Totally,
out because like that's a major leak. Like I mean that's like a top
totally.
level leak.
Yeah. And I have a bet on it too, and I'd like to collect on my bet who it was.
So you can't
But
collect until they figure it out, I guess.
mhm.
Verify it.
So I don't, I mean, the Supreme Court opened their doors, since COVID. This is the first term now that we can go back in. I don't know if they're just planning never to tell us, if they haven't figured it out yet. Seems like it would be appropriate for this to be public information. It was a crime. I don't know if the person will be prosecuted, but
Yeah. So are you willing to share who you're betting on, or is that private because it's probably a little bit you don't want to make an accusation that's maybe not founded and yeah, I mean that might be
well,
inappropriate perhaps. I don't know.
first of all, I half of your viewers probably think it's inappropriate that I have a bet on it. So but I bet it was a law clerk from Yale or Harvard who's clerking for Sotomayor.
Okay.
That was my bet. Another person bet it was a cleaning lady who
Oh,
found a
okay.
copy and got paid a sum to give it over.
Yeah. So if you win the bet, I mean what are the stakes? Is it or who are you betting with? That
Um,
might be interesting too.
yeah, we bet $50 and we would donate to each other's organizations, whoever
Oh, very
won
good.
would.
I think everyone could agree that that's a good way to spend the winnings. Um, so next week is or this week, I'm sorry, this week is the NIFLA conference. And
Yeah.
tell me, like, how are what are you looking forward to this week? Or what do you know? I guess
Mm,
we'll focus on the positives.
yeah. Well, I mean, it's our annual conference. We always have, wonderful people coming. It's great to see good friends again. We have some great speakers this year. Professor Lincomb from Regent University, she speaks every year. She is a dynamo. And one night, and she's a professor of the law school there at Regent. And one night, she arranged to have 80 law students come and meet with the lawyers and the executive directors who are going to be at the conference in kind of like a speed dating kind of scenario where they move from table to table and ask, when I'm out of law school, what can I do to help? What are your priorities? What kind of legal challenges are you facing? So we're trying to get more law students with the vision of being involved with the pregnancy center after they graduate, either on the board or serving somehow.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, that's
Hmm.
wow, what a wonderful thing to try and grow, yeah, our legal
Hmm.
team into the future.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Anne,
We.
one of my last questions would be is working in this, legal space for so many years, what's a story that you can think of where you have seen like God's fingerprints? And I can think of a few that I can consider, connect to you and NIFLA, but what's a story that comes to your mind when you see God working through, through this effort and sort of bringing things together in his way?
Mhm. Well, I see it almost every day, Jacob, when I help pregnancy centers convert to medical, because a center will have existed for a while doing the resource part of it, but they're not seeing all the clients they want to see. And so what can we do next? But they're in that, it's a big leap to go medical. Should we really? And then the Knights of Columbus will call them and say, hey, we'd like to raise money to buy an ultrasound machine for you. And they go, oh. And then a doctor will come to their banquet and be inspired and go up and tell the executive director, hey, I'd like to be your medical director. Think like God just like
Wow.
arranges the dominoes that need to happen. So that's almost like every day. But one of the biggest things, and I tell this story all the time just to encourage centers, is back in the 90s, the Right to Life League of Southern California got sued for practicing medicine without a license. And I was on the board then. And what we were doing was just basically urine pregnancy testing. We were actually sending the clients to a lab because it was before the instant dipstick ones.
Okay.
And she would come back a week later and we'd hand her the results of her urine pregnancy test from the lab. And an attorney, probably many people are familiar with, a very feminist attorney, her name's Gloria Allred in California. She sued the Right to Life League for a bunch of things, like we falsely imprison clients, we intentionally inflict emotional distress on them, but also for practicing medicine without a license. So we go through trial. Everything else is thrown out except the judge rules, yeah, you're giving a pregnancy test result, that's practicing medicine. You have to be licensed to do that. And we all sat around the table going, how are we going to do that? This is going to shut us down. I'm sure that's what Gloria hoped for. So as we're brainstorming, we're like, well, if we have to be medical, let's figure out how hard it is to go medical. And in California, there's a whole licensing of primary care clinics that you follow. So we started licensing clinics. And then we said, well, this is a lot of work to do just for a pregnancy test. What else can we do? And it was at that time that ultrasound was being more readily available
Mm.
and guidelines were being promoted where nurses could be trained to do it. So we said, let's add ultrasound. And now there's at least, let's see, of the 2,700, I think 75% are medical facilities offering ultrasound. There's a lot of clinics nationwide offering ultrasound since that lawsuit. So what I tell people is, Gloria Allred went to my law school. We went to Loyola Law School in Los Angeles. And one day I want to go to an alumni event and I'm going to hunt her down and I'm just going to shake her hand and say, Gloria, I just want to thank you, because what you meant for evil, God used for good, for the saving of many lives. And that is the truth. I've seen that over and over again in the pro-life movement. What we think is evil coming at us, God just used to either strengthen us, to steer us in a different direction. So she got a measly
Beautiful.
$40,000 of attorney's fees out of us, which was a lot back then. But it was worth the return on investment, because look at the lives saved by women just seeing their babies on a screen. Opening that window to the womb makes all the difference for women.
Yeah, ultrasounds are, yeah, they have, yeah, I mean, the percentage of women that will choose life because of the imagery that's seen inside of their womb is, what percent do you think it might, what do you think it does to the, when someone is able to go from hearing things to actually seeing, yeah,
Mhm.
how would you measure that impact that it has?
Well, the statistics say like 70% to 80% of women who were really seriously thinking about abortion, once they saw their baby on the screen and realized it's not a blob of tissue, it has a heartbeat, it changes their decision like that. And especially if their boyfriend or their husband is with them seeing it, the male almost gets it quicker. Like he sees it and he goes, "That's my baby," you know. So we have to do a better job at reaching the partner in these situations, because no woman chooses abortion because it's a great option. She chooses it because she feels like she has no other choice, and that's not choice, you know. So if we had the men involved in supporting her, that would make all the difference in the world.
Yeah, and it seems like the ultrasound mixed with someone that cares and that listening posture, like
Mhm.
that's like the perfect setup. And it seems like abortion pill reversal is postured to have like a similar outcome to that of the ultrasound machine, because it's helping us reach a group that was, before APR, was really hard to provide hope to. And now
Mhm.
there's a way to provide a positive response to someone who's taken the abortion pill, and as a way
Mhm.
for them to respond, whether it results in life or in failure. Either way, it results in them being able to try and do something, with the majority actually being, yeah, life-giving more so than
Mhm.
death. And so but it feels like it's a way to respond in a positive way based on where someone might be. Uh,
Yeah.
and well, Anne, I really appreciate your time, and I'm looking forward to seeing you and everyone else at NIFLA this week. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for being on the podcast. Yeah, I hope you have a wonderful afternoon. How might someone who hears this, whenever they hear it, it may not be this week, right before before your conference, but how might
Mhm.
someone pray for you and your team, and when they're driving to
Mm.
their, they're doing their commute, and they're thinking about what you're having to go through with like 50 different state constitutions and all these new
Mm.
laws, and people needing help across the country? How might they pray for you, especially as they
Mm.
hear this?
Thank you, Jacob. That's so nice. I think like how you started this segment, like how do you focus? Like, to pray that NIFLA really is focused on things that God wants us to be focused on and can anticipate where the attacks are coming in the future so we can help strengthen centers would be a great one. And we spend a lot of time praying for pregnancy centers because they're the ones on the front line. They're seeing life and death decisions every day. uh, I can't imagine how hard that must be. So I almost feel guilty asking for prayers when it's really, we're praying for them, so in the hard work they do, that they don't get discouraged and that they have success and that women find them. But I want to thank you too, Jacob. You do such an awesome job and you are such a good friend of NIFLA. So we want to thank you very much for what you're doing in the pro-life movement and helping centers with advertising and websites. And we know you do things with excellence.
Yeah, and well, thank you. And I just feel like there's a lot of when it comes to legal attacks, it's sort of like outside the comfort zone for so many directors, and the fear can be very crippling. And the fact that they have someone who can help them avoid risk and help them, when the attack comes, even when it's not deserved, is very
Mhm.
liberating for someone to, let go of a lot of anxiety by leaning on someone who is strong in that space.
Mhm.
So, well, I guess, to me, to wrap this podcast up, would you mind, I guess, praying for the pregnancy clinics as you do
Mm.
normally?
Yes, please. Dear Lord, I thank you so much for this incredible network of pregnancy centers nationwide. It's close to 3,000, Lord, all serving women in their communities because of their love for you. trying to protect those that bear your image, Lord. And in a battle that is way more than flesh and blood, I just ask your protection, Lord. Just have angels camp around their buildings, keep their buildings safe, all the people that go in and out of there, and just make their buildings be like a light on the hill that is burning bright, so that women faced with unplanned pregnancies and their partners come to the center first before doing anything else. Let them find a space where they can be loved on, where they can hear truth, where they can see their baby and make a decision that will not hurt them the rest of their lives, Lord. And may all this glorify you, because it's you that this is all about. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Awesome. Thank you, Ann. It's been a
Thank you,
pleasure.
Jacob. God bless you.
All right. See you tomorrow. Or
See you tomorrow.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Our sponsor is Heritage House. Heritage House provides over 1,500 resources and tools for the pro-life movement, from fetal models to yard signs to the precious feet pin. Heritage House is proud of nearly 50 years of standing shoulder to shoulder with pro-life advocates like you. See Heritage House online at www.pro.life. That's pro.life. Supporting our sponsors, like Heritage House, supports the Pro-Life Team podcast. Thank you.
Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want. He makes me lie down